Welcome to Daily Buzz News. ActionSA has lodged complaints with the Human Rights Commission against Sports Minister Gayton McKenzie and Public Works Minister Dean Macpherson over alleged past racial remarks, calling for accountability from both leaders.
ActionSA says it's prepared to approach the Equality Court on the matter. Let's now speak to ActionSA Member of Parliament, Alan Beasley. Mr. Beasley, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this morning. So maybe let's just start off with maybe just clarifying whether or not we know that the supposed slurs were actually made by Mr. McKenzie. Has he confirmed, especially to the party, that he did indeed say these racial slurs back in 2011?
And I think what's important to note is that he hasn't denied these slurs. I mean, this matter blew up on social media up on Friday night, and there's been no denial that he didn't make the slurs. So I think in that we can take it that if there's no denial that he actually in fact made these, because he would have been very quick to come out to saying he didn't make these slurs. So I think we can take it that these slurs were indeed made by him.
So considering the time lapse since these racial slurs were allegedly made, what significance does then ActionSA attach to holding leaders accountable for such past racist remarks, especially when they hold influential positions today?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that racial slurs defaming individuals is a crime. So if you commit a crime, steal from somebody 10 years ago, you still half with racial slurs too. You know, it is a crime. It's defined as a crime in terms of our act of legislation. So the fact that it was made 10 years ago doesn't hold any water, because a crime is a crime and you must be held accountable and there must be consequences. We can say because somebody stole money 10 years ago, it's fine. It's not fine. He's a minister of sports, arts and culture. He's a minister that one department that can actually unify South Africa. For a minister to actually make such painful, terrible, outrageous slurs, there's just no place for it in our country. And it comes on the back of Minister Macpherson making comments about a predominantly group of black South Africans as homos and amaparas. We've also reported to him, these people are ministers of all South Africans, not just of their political party or political race group. They're ministers of all South Africans. And our country is so divided, there's just no place for it, and there needs to be consequences for both these ministers.
And in your view, Alan, how do such incidents of racism by public figures influence current societal attitudes as well as the fight against racial discrimination in our country?
No, it's absolutely massive, and I'm new to politics. I've been in Parliament for 3-4 years, and the racial undertones is just unbelievable. If Parliament cannot be united on race levels, we can't expect the rest of our country to. Parliament must lead by example in society. So when society sees ministers making such horrible, insulting comments, racial slurs like that, how can we be divided as a country? So parliamentarians must lead, ministers must lead, and unfortunately at the moment they're not. They're actually letting hold of South Africa down, and there must be dire consequences for them.
So ActionSA has taken the bold step to take this up with the Human Rights Commission. What role do you think they should play in addressing past instances of racial misconduct, especially by public officials, and how can this serve as a deterrent for future misconduct?
No, it's massive. The Human Rights Commission, their name is Human Rights. They're there to protect human rights, and that's the dignity of people and prevention of unfair discrimination. So their role is pivotal, and I think if we're going to set a tone, we need to set a tone with ministers and leaders in society. So the Human Rights Commission must do a proper investigation for both these ministers, and actually say if we're not happy with the outcome or satisfied with the outcome, we will take it to the Equality Court. But the first step is going to the Human Rights Commission, and that's where we've done. And because this is a high-profile matter, we're expecting them to act quickly on this.
How do you think a failure possibly to acknowledge such behavior would have an impact, particularly on the overall efforts to build a society where we view each other as equals?
Yeah, it's the only way we're going to move forward as a country in terms of the economy, in terms of unemployment, is if we unite. I come back to Parliament, and you've got two political parties in the GNU are so opposed to each other in terms of race-based policies. We're just not going to move forward. And and the talk that they actually utter is just totally unacceptable. And the only way we're going to unite all is we all talk and we all embrace each other as equals, and we are. We're all created by the same maker, black and white, rich and poor, male and female, and we need to treat each other, and then we'll be able to move forward as a country. Because until we can address the racial discrimination that's happening in our country, we will never move forward, and we'll never be able to address unemployment, crime, and inequalities in our country.
Does it matter that he would put it to his past life? I mean, you mentioned that a crime done in the past should not necessarily be excused now in the present. If you stole money then it would certainly still stand. We also saw with the former MP that came from the DA who also had racial slurs then suddenly come up when he became a member of parliament. If Minister McKenzie was to come in and say, but this is something from my past life, do you think that would be excusable?
No, I don't think it is excusable, especially as a minister. I mean, we all make mistakes, but there's that saying, I think if the leopard doesn't change his spots, you don't, and I've looked at those comments and they're really sickening to the core. They really, touch on one's humanity, and so to say, I've changed, I've moved on from that, it's very difficult to actually see. And as a minister, specifically as a minister, him and Minister Macpherson must be held to account for these comments. They are ministers, they're ministers of all South Africans. And as I say, a leopard doesn't change his spots overnight.
And what consequences do you think would be appropriate for these two ministers?
Well, I think first of all, they need to do an apology very, very quickly. I think the longer they leave the apology just highlights the actual thoughts. I think a written apology would be first, but then I think the Human Rights Commission needs to do a proper investigation. And then we also, President Ramaphosa must actually dismiss these two ministers. You can't hold positions of power if you've got ministers. We're not asking them to be put on special leave, we're asking them to be dismissed.
This all emanated, Alan, from the conversation that was had on a podcast with young people who were themselves making racial slurs against a particular racial group. What message does ActionSA hope to send to young people and marginalized communities through this action, and how does it align with your broader mission to promote human rights and social justice?
I think get back with Minister Macpherson's comments came out on the comments on the podcast. So this has been brief for the last 2 weeks. And Minister Macpherson's comments referring to people as hobos and putters. I engaged with the homeless community, and they're such hurtful comments. So if we need to move forward as a society, there's just zero basis for these comments. And again, it comes back to leaders. Leaders must lead by example. Minister Macpherson, and McKenzie was outraged by the communities on the podcast, and rightly so, but he should also be outraged by his own comments, but he won't. He'll just go quiet, and he just won't say anything.
If maybe we look at the precedents that this could set and a possibility of a can of worms that could be opened by something like this, because this simply means that people in the public are able to go back many years on social media accounts of those who do sit in those positions of power and rehash anything that could certainly seem as offensive. Where do we place in terms of how someone is rehabilitated and how we then move forward, or what precedents do you think this is particularly going to set?
Yeah, I think rehabilitation is important. Now, we come from a past that's very divided, but I think one of the ways to rehabilitate is people actually put their hands up and say, I was wrong and I apologize. That's the first, until people can actually do that, rehabilitation is not possible. So I think that's why we're saying an apology first and foremost is very, very important, and a quick apology, and then we can look at rehabilitation. But until they actually put their, if the Human Rights Commission does the investigation and finds them guilty, and then they say, okay, they'll rehabilitate, it's a bit late, they need to apologize now, and they need to lead by example. As I said earlier, we all make mistakes. We come from a divided past, and when we make a mistake, put our hands up and say we apologize. And apology must be heartfelt and truthful and addressed to all South Africans.
You mentioned a quick apology. Minister McKenzie hasn't sent an apology in the last couple of days. If you were to apologize now, would that suffice?
No, it wouldn't be suffice. We'll continue with the Human Rights Commission. because as I say, he is a minister, he must help. And then the Human Rights Commission will do their sanction, and if they believe an apology is sufficient, then we will consider the options afterwards. But we believe the Human Rights Commission must do a proper investigation. They must do the sanction. If they believe an apology is sufficient, we will consider it basically that. But I think the important thing is one of the reasons why, there's two reasons why I got into politics, because of unemployment and racism. So, I've been given a platform now to speak against non-racism, and I think as ActionSA we must talk into that, and we must use this platform, because there's no place for racism in our country, and we won't move forward until we actually unite this one. And we see it with our rugby team, we see it with our cricket team, what we can actually do when we unite it. With my child, with her sport, the team is a diverse team, and they get on so well. Why can't we do it at a leadership and at a parliamentary level? And when we do so, our country will definitely be able to move forward.
Of course, and this is quite a critical ministry in uniting people, especially when it comes to equality in the country. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for watching Daily Buzz News.